Hey everyone, this is John from EastCoastArmory.com, and I'm here today with a model showcase video for this 1/35th scale Israeli M50 Super Sherman. Unlike my other smaller scale build videos, in which those models are built for commission and belong to a private collector, this model here was built for my own personal collection and is not for sale and or purchase. However, if anyone is interested in having a model built to the same specs that you see here, I often take on commission builds from scales ranging from 1/35th scale all the way up to 1/6 scale. For pricing and availability information, that information would be best by contacting me through the email address listed below, which is info@eastcoastarmory.com. The model itself was acquired from a model show several years ago and sat in my stash for some time. I recently took the model out of storage and decided to start on it, as I was using this 1/35th scale model here as a builder's aid for the 1/16 scale M50 Super Sherman that I recently just finished for commission, and pictures and video of that build are found on the ECA Facebook page as well as on my video listings. With that build out of the way, I then went ahead and finished off the model to the completed state that you see here. First, a quick walk around the model. Before I continue with the video, let's go ahead and take a step back to when the model was first started to get an idea on the starter kit as well as what the original kit contents were. And here goes the model right before construction. The model itself started off as a 1/35th scale plastic kit from MP Models. MP Models was an American-based plastic model company that was around in the 1980s, and as far as my knowledge, are long since defunct. MP's niche was that they created Sherman tank variants that weren't being offered at the time by the major manufacturers. And at this time, to put things in context, it was Italeri and Tamiya. They offered several different kits as well as conversion kits for the early M4, M4A3, a conversion for the Firefly, an M4A4 upper and lower long stretched out hull, as well as the HVSS suspension. This kit here utilizes a couple components from their series, namely the HVSS as well as their M4A4 upper and lower hulls. These kits were somewhat prolific back 20 years ago. I remember in my childhood in the 1990s seeing these kits in the back of some small-time hobby shops, and also you would see them in model shows. This particular kit here I purchased about 5 or 6 years ago from a model show for about $15. These kits since have become more and more scarce, and I believe are actually quite rare these days. Kits like this are kind of passé in the fact that you have the modern companies, namely DML, as well as some other rest and aftermarket manufacturers, producing the exact same components. However, this kit is still pretty interesting in that it's probably one of the only M50 kits that are represented in plastic, the other being from Dragon. The Dragon kit in comparison is probably a lot more better in tooling, as it did come out several years after this one. Let's give this model a quick unboxing and review. First, the tank slides out of the box sideways, which is kind of rare these days on model tanks. The kit itself is all still sealed in the bags, and the parts are molded in green plastic, which is pretty standard on tank models. This here is the HVSS suspension. As you can see, the tooling compared to today's standards is a little bit dated, as it's slightly soft. However, should be fine for this build. Tank also features individual static track links, which I will not be using and will be swapping out for a workable AFV Club track. There go the sprockets. This here looks like the turret, as well as the other M51 specific or M50 specific components. The decal sheet. There goes the turret itself. Turret does have some cast texturing on it, as well as some cast numbers, and looks to be a decent casting despite the age of the model. Getting to the hull parts bag. Here goes the upper hull for the M4A4 stretched out hull Sherman. Actually, I'm quite impressed with the tooling so far. Tooling is actually pretty good on it, despite, again, the kit being about 30 years old. The hull front section has all of its cast texturing, as well as its cast numbers pre-molded in. It's got its welds, as well as its torch cut lines on the steel parts. This is also true for the 3-piece transmission cover. The hull is in several sections and assembles like a box. And it does have its fuel tank fasteners, which are located on the sides here, which is a trade-on M4A4 Shermans. Interesting on the runner are the track extension pieces that we have here. As I said before, this set was sold as an aftermarket accessory in order to convert a Tamiya or a Tallery kit into that of a M4A4 Sherman, as there were no M4A4s in plastic at the time. To do this, you need to, because the tanks are longer, they actually have longer tracks. And to do this, we have two sets here of tracks that are for a Tallery Shermans, as well as the Tamiya M4A3. If you notice, the Tamiya one has the metal chevron with the molded in duckbill extenders, and the Tallery links are the rubber pad type, which is common on a lot of their kits. Also, as you can see, it has the corresponding marks in which you would plug in the rubber section of the Tamiya one here, as well as on the other side, and you would have enough track links to equip one M4A4 Sherman. The model that you see here was heavily modified from the components that came with just the out-of-the-box kit. This model here features several aftermarket components from Def Model, AFV Club, as well as some components that are 3D printed from shapeways.com. The model also has a lot of other spare parts mounted on the tank from also AFV Club, as well as Dragon. We'll be going over all of these additions and modifications in this video. Moving our way to the model suspension, the HVSS suspension that you see here is the kit original and are assembled out of box. Like with all of the HVSS Shermans that I build, I always paint the tops of the shock absorbers with a little brush of silver, as well as all of the Zerk fittings on both the road wheels, as well as the return rollers are painted in red. This simple addition greatly helps the detail and accuracy of the model. Moving to the model sprockets, the sprockets on this model here are not the kit originals. These sprockets here are from Dragon and are actually spares from the 1/35 scale Dragon T28 Super Heavy tank. I recently built that model and posted a video showcase on my channel. On there, you will see that the way the runners are designed and laid out, you will have spare sprockets as well as lots of other spare Sherman tank components. Many of them were utilized on this build. The Dragon sprockets represent a spoked version of the sprocket and are a lot more crisper in detailing compared to the more primitive tooling found on the M50 kit. Also, another advantage about using the Dragon sprocket is that of the workable AFV Club track links. The AFV Club track links time and contour very well with the Dragon sprocket and are a perfect fit. Now, one thing as of note, the AFV Club workable track links are very fragile and have a bad reputation amongst the armor modeling community. However, when you are assembling them, if you remove a little bit of material from the sides of the track teeth for the Sherman track, the tolerances will loosen up and the track will assemble a lot easier and will also have a better flow to it compared if you were trying to muscle it together as per the kit. Once assembled, the track has a nice roll to it and contours very well with both the teeth of the sprocket as well as the rest of the tank's HVSS suspension. In addition to the sprockets, in order to mount the sprockets to the tank, you also have to replace the stock final drive. The final drive that is found on the tank is molded into the side of the hull, as what was seen in the unboxing. The Dragon final drives are a lot better than the molded in kit versions and also are required in order to properly hold the sprockets nice and true. To add them, you have to delete the molded in versions and then simply replace them with the Dragons. The molded in versions were sanded away with a Dremel and then polished off with a palm sander. Also connected to the final drives, we see here that of the single-piece transmission cover. The transmission cover that you see here is different from the kit original. As we recall, the kit original utilized the earlier style 3-piece transmission cover. While this transmission cover is accurate for very early pattern M50 Shermans, by the time the M50s were up to this standard here, most of the 3-piece transmissions were gone by the wayside. In place was the single piece, which offered better armor protection. The transmission that you see here is another piece from the spare parts bin, and this transmission is from AFV Club, more specifically the AFV Club M40 self-propelled gun. That's another video model showcase that I have posted on my channel, and also, like with the T28, with the way the runners are set up on that model, you will have an extra spare transmission cover and rivet strip. In order to mount this component to the stock MMP hull, did require a little bit of fitting to both the hull sides as well as the top portion of the top hull. However, with a little bit of fitting, the parts were a simple fit and also greatly helped the look of the model that you see here. One modification that I made to the lower hull was actually the addition of the tank sponsons. As we've seen from the unboxing, the stock kit is sponsonless, which was common for Tamiya kits of the era. However, even though the kit does not contain sponsons, the lower hull as well as the upper hull does have these little shelves molded in which a fabricated sponson can be affixed. For the sponson, I needed to take the turret off in order for you to see the inside. As you can see, for the tank sponsons, I went ahead and fabricated them out of 2 strips of sheet styrene. They were simply glued into the little recesses that are provided with the stock kit. With the sponsons added, it both helps with the accuracy of the model, but it also gives the model a lot more structural strength than left sponsonless. Moving up from the transmission takes us to first the bow M1919. The version that you see here is a spare from the Dragon T28 and was a simple switch from the kit original. The kit does supply you with a decent M1919, however, it is a little bit cruder compared to the Dragon counterpart. Moving towards the headlights. The headlights on the model, as well as the taillights, are the M&P kit original. However, the brush guards are that from the Dragon. This includes both the headlights, taillights, and what was originally the horn brush guard. Added to the headlight guards is that of the small little canister, which is used for the headlight hole plug that I always mention in these videos. Moving to what would have originally been the tank's Siren. Like I mentioned in my Israeli Sherman videos, one modification the Israelis made was they replaced the original Siren with that of an infrared light. The light was housed in the same location as the original Siren. Now, this version here has the brush guard still in place. This is not uncommon, as a handful of M50 Shermans and M51s still retain the original style horn brush guard. However, most of them that you will see will have the center portion here removed in order for the light to be emitted without any obstructions in the way. Also fabricated was that of the cover top portion here on the brush guard. All Israeli Shermans feature this little component, and it's a telltale sign that the Sherman was once in Israeli service. As for the light itself, it was just another component found in my spare parts bin. It was simply mounted, painted gloss black, and then topped off with the last of the detailing that you see here. Moving our way to the bow hatches. The tank, originally being an M4A4, features the early style hatches. Now, many of the tanks during the war had the applicant armor fitted because of the more vulnerable nature of the front exposed bow blister for the hatches. This tank here is no exception. When the Israelis received the tanks, most of them still retain this component here, and if not, the Israelis fabricated the pieces themselves. The components that you see on this model here are scratch built out of styrene, and the version over the M1919 features its tarpaulin rail. The rail is just a simple piece of wire that was bent and added in place. As for the driver, it has the characteristic IDF grab handle. The grab handle is also made out of styrene, and once added also gives the model a nice little detail edge. Moving our way to the sides of the hull, being an Israeli Sherman, it receives the usual Israeli components, being the spare track rack, storage bin, auxiliary generator exhaust, and spare tires. These components here that I just pointed out are stock and come with the M&P models kit and were utilized as they were adequately detailed. The generator did receive a little bit of modifications in that I modified the actual exhaust enter and exit pipe with that of a small aluminum tube. The aluminum tube is a lot more detailed than the stock component and gives, again, for a little bit of an extra detail punch. Moving our way up from the exhaust takes us to the jerrican holders. Now, the kit does supply you with a very basic set of jerrican holders. However, they are woefully inaccurate and would require a little bit of scratch building in order to improve them. Fortunately, since this kit was released since the 1980s, there have been several options available for aftermarket components, both in plastic, resin, as well as in photo etch. The holders that you see here, however, are actually made out of 3D print and were acquired from shapeways.com. The vendor is listed below in the following link. The jerrican holders come 3D printed on this elaborate runner here. They are very easily removed off the runner and are a very simple drop-in installation to the tank that you see here. They're highly recommended and do give the tank a lot of detail fidelity. Moving our way to the tank's Pioneer tools. The tools that you see on the model are a mix between the M&P original as well as spares from the Dragon T28. They were simply painted, weathered, and mounted to the model in the locations that would be appropriate for an Israeli Sherman. Now, also we can see here that all of the tool posts have been painted in red as well as the lift hooks. This is a feature that the Israelis did do on their vehicles. Like I previously mentioned, the engine deck is depicting that of a later style Israeli M50 Sherman. And the engine deck that you see here is totally kit original with no mods added. Moving from the engine deck takes us to the bullet splash guards on both the turret as well as on the filler caps. As you can see, I went ahead and added the drainage holes that are missing on the stock kit. The addition of the drainage holes are a simple addition that greatly helps the look and accuracy of the model. Moving our way to the tank's turret. The turret that you see here is the stock M&P kit original. One modification that I made though was the addition of turret locks. Out of the box, the turret does not have any locks mounted in order to keep the turret mounted to the tank. The way the locks were fabricated, I went ahead and simply used two pieces of Plastruct angle and glued them to the turret ring. They simply lock on to the corresponding notches, which are found integrally molded into the M&P kit. The addition of the turret is like any other 1/35th scale tank. You simply put it into the corresponding notches and rotate. One area of the kit turret, as of note, is that of the rear bustle / counterweight. If anyone has one of these kits on hand or has built one of these, you will notice that the fitting of the turret is quite poor, and because of which you will have sufficient body work to be made in removal of seams in this location here. Once the seams were deleted, I went ahead and added cast texturing to the component. The rest of the details, like the grab handle as well as the lift hooks, are actually the kit originals and were surprisingly an easy fit once all the bodywork was complete. Moving forward takes us to the smoke grenades. The smoke grenade launchers that you see here are scratch built out of plastic and aluminum tubing. The kit does supply you with their own versions, however, are poorly detailed and rendered, and the scratch built versions do help aid the model from the kit originals. Moving our way to the top of the turret takes us to the MP48 spring antenna bases. The base that you see here are actually the stock M&P versions and were actually pretty adequate out of the box. They did require, however, a small bit of removal of a little bit of flash. Once the flash was removed, they were simply mounted in place that you see here. The pintle mount is from the Dragon T28, as well as the M1919 on the M1917 cradle is also from the Dragon M103 heavy tank. Also, as a quick note, typically on Israeli tanks, on the pintle mount you would have an M2HB 50 caliber machine gun, which would be mounted on an M23 cradle. One such gun is not supplied with the M&P kit, as well as I did not have any of these components in my spare parts. I tried to track down a M2HB on an M23 cradle in 1/35th scale. Some of the sets that I found were from Academy. However, it seems that all of the sets are currently back ordered until December. Once the piece comes in, it's just a simple swap out of the unit that you see here. So this gun here is really nothing more than a stand-in. But it's not totally inaccurate to utilize this weapon here, as the Israelis did utilize the M1919 to great effect on all of their vehicles. Only the Israeli M1919 was chambered in 7.62 NATO or 308. Another quick mod made was the hollowing out of the gunner's periscope box that we have here. The stock kit has this component molded solid and is not hollow. With a small Dremel and a router bit, I went ahead and hollowed it out, which also helps the look of it. Moving from there takes us to the tank's gun and gun barrel. The gun mantlet that you see here is all kit original and was adequately detailed out of the box. However, keep in mind this is also another location that you will need to have a little bit of bodywork in order to blend all the parts seamlessly. As for the barrel, the kit barrel and muzzle brake that are supplied are very simple in detailing and can be replaced. The version that you see here is actually an aftermarket component from DEF model, and the DEF model set contains a aluminum CNC barrel along with a nicely finely detailed French 75mm muzzle brake. Here is the item number of the set, and the component here is designed for all French tanks which utilize the 75mm gun, which would apply to the AMX-13 as well as their EBR armored car. The M50, of course, utilized the same 75mm gun, so the addition of the barrel was a simple addition. Moving on to the tank's paint and markings. The tank is painted in your average Israeli armor sand. And as for the markings that you see on the vehicle are all hand painted and hand applied. Like you saw in the unboxing, the kit does supply you with a set of decals. However, the decals are so old that when placed in the water, they simply just deteriorated and crumbled, which is not unusual for a kit of this age. The markings that you see here are all hand applied and hand painted. Like I mentioned in the other Israeli tank videos that I've done, it is not uncommon to see markings on these Israeli tanks painted on in a rougher format. The actual ID tags that we have on the front, the back, and on the mantlet are decals that were luckily enough found in my decal spare parts box. As for the white stripe, like I mentioned in the 116 M51 video, Israeli tanks of this time period featured a prominent aerial recognition stripe that ran from the back of the vehicle all the way up to the front of the turret. As for my final thoughts on the build, the model itself does assemble into a very decent rendition of an Israeli M50 Sherman. However, it does also require the addition of some aftermarket parts as well as a little bit of elbow grease in order to bring it up to the standard that you see here. Keep in mind this tank is a vintage model kit, and because of which does suffer a little bit from its antiquated tooling. Because of that, this model here I can't recommend to a beginner, or even for that matter, a low-level moderate. For this type of build here, you will need to have some experience under your belt. So this model here will be for more of a higher-end, mid-range model builder, as well as a highly skilled modeler. Besides this kit, there have been a couple other renditions of the M50 Super Sherman, both of which have been released by Dragon. Their latest re-release features a little bit of updated tooling, as well as a set of IDF figures. That set is probably easy to find as it's been recently released and can be found on the internet as well as on eBay. And that concludes this model showcase video for this 1/35th scale Israeli M50 Super Sherman. If you like this video, stop by and like us on Facebook. And don't forget to check out eastcoastarmory.com for more 135, 116, and 1/6 scale builds, as well as 1/6 and 1/16 scale detail components. Thank you.